It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in the small town of Maplewood. The streets were calm, the air was warm, and the soft sound of wind chimes came from the porch of an old white wooden house at the end of Elm Street. Inside that house lived a young woman named Emily Carter. She was 26 years old, worked as an English teacher at the local school, and had always believed that her life was simple and ordinary. But that was about to change forever. Emily sat by the window with a cup of tea in her hand. She loved peaceful moments like this, when she could just watch the trees move and think about her students. She had always loved teaching English. Her students often told her, "Miss Carter, your stories make learning easy." That always made her smile. She believed that the best way to learn English, or anything, was through stories because stories touch the heart. But that day, Emily's thoughts were somewhere else. She had received a letter that morning, written in an old-fashioned style and sent with no return address. The envelope had her name written carefully, Miss Emily Carter. No one called her Miss Carter outside of school. She turned it over in her hands, wondering who could have sent it. Finally, she opened it. Inside, there was only one short line. "The truth about your family is hidden in your grandmother's house." She read it again. Her hands trembled slightly. What truth? What secret? Her grandmother, Margaret Carter, had passed away 5 years ago. Emily had loved her deeply. Grandma Margaret had always been kind and warm, full of wisdom and laughter. She was the one who had inspired Emily to teach, to be patient, to believe in the good in people. But there had never been any talk about a secret. Emily laughed nervously. "This must be some kind of joke," she said aloud. But deep inside, something told her it wasn't. She looked at the clock. It was almost 4 p.m. Her grandmother's house was still standing on the other side of town. After her death, it had been locked up and untouched. Nobody lived there anymore, but Emily had the keys. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she whispered to herself, maybe I should go. She put on her jacket, took her car keys, and left. As she drove through the familiar streets, memories flooded her mind. She remembered her grandmother's voice telling bedtime stories. "Emily," she would say, "life is like a book. Some chapters are happy, some are sad, but every page is worth reading." That memory made Emily smile. When she reached the old house, she felt a strange mix of nostalgia and fear. The garden was overgrown, the windows dusty. She unlocked the door slowly. The smell of old books and lavender filled the air. Everything looked exactly as it had years ago. Her grandmother's rocking chair by the window, the bookshelf filled with classics, and the framed photos on the mantelpiece. She walked through the rooms quietly, almost afraid to disturb the silence. Then she saw something on the old writing desk. A small wooden box, the kind her grandmother used to keep letters in. Emily opened it. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with time. She picked up one and gasped. It was a picture of her grandmother, standing next to a man Emily had never seen before. On the back of the photo were 3 words written in ink, "For Emily's truth." Her heart began to race. Who was this man? And why was her name connected to this picture? Suddenly she heard the soft creak of a floorboard behind her. She turned quickly, but no one was there. The house was silent again. She let out a breath, realizing it was probably just the wind. But still, something about the place felt alive, as if it was waiting for her to discover something. Emily sat down and began to go through the rest of the box. There were letters, photos, and a small notebook tied with a ribbon. She untied it and opened the first page. The handwriting was delicate and familiar. Her grandmother's. It began with the words, "If you are reading this, my dear Emily, it means the time has come for you to know the truth about our family." Emily froze. Her eyes moved quickly down the page. "There is something I never told anyone, not even your father. It's about where we come from, and why I left the town where I was born. I kept this secret because I wanted to protect you all. But now you deserve to know." Emily's eyes widened. She whispered, "Protect me? From what?" Her grandmother's words continued. "When I was young, I fell in love with a man your family never accepted. They said he was poor, uneducated, and not good enough for me. But I didn't care. I loved him with all my heart. His name was Thomas Reed." Emily stopped reading. Thomas Reed. She remembered the name on the back of the photo. This must be him. The letter went on. "We planned to get married, but before that could happen, something terrible occurred. He disappeared one night and no one ever saw him again. Some people said he ran away, but I never believed it. I searched for him for years. Then when I realized I might never find him, I came here to Maplewood to start a new life." Emily sat in silence. Her heart felt heavy. She had never known this side of her grandmother's life. She always thought Grandma Margaret had lived a calm, ordinary life. But this was a love story filled with pain and mystery. She looked around the room again. "Grandma," she whispered softly, "why didn't you tell me?" Just then she noticed another folded paper tucked inside the notebook. It wasn't in her grandmother's handwriting. The letters were strong and bold. It read, "If you wish to know the whole truth, look under the rose in the garden." Emily's eyes widened. The rose in the garden. Her grandmother had a single rose bush in the backyard. She stood up quickly and went outside. The sun was setting, and the garden was glowing in the orange light. The rose bush stood near the fence, still alive after all these years. She knelt beside it and brushed away some dry leaves. Her fingers touched something hard beneath the soil. She dug a little deeper and found a small tin box. Her heart beat faster as she opened it. Inside was an old locket shaped like a heart, and a piece of paper folded many times. She opened the paper. There was a message written in faded ink. "To my beloved Margaret, if you ever find this, know that I never left you. I was taken away against my will, but I will always love you. And if you're reading this, our story is not over." Emily's breath caught. Her hand shook as she whispered, "He didn't run away. He was taken." The letter ended with 2 initials. TR. She looked at the locket and opened it. Inside was a small picture, her grandmother and the same man smiling together. For a long moment, Emily couldn't move. The quiet garden felt sacred. She suddenly understood why her grandmother had loved roses so much. They had hidden her greatest memory, her deepest pain, and maybe her hope. As the evening breeze touched her face, Emily whispered softly, "Grandma, I'll find out what really happened. I promise." And in that moment she felt something she couldn't explain. A sense of warmth, like her grandmother's spirit was right there beside her, smiling. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every word from her grandmother's notebook and the mysterious letter. "He never left you. I was taken away." The words echoed in her head like a haunting melody. What did it mean? Who took him? Why was it such a secret? Outside, the moonlight streamed through the window, lighting up her room in silver. Emily sat up, whispering softly to herself, "Grandma, what were you trying to tell me?" She turned on the lamp, reached for her phone, and opened her notes app. "Okay," she said, taking a deep breath. "Let's think logically." She began writing what she knew so far. 1. Grandma Margaret loved a man named Thomas Reed. 2. He disappeared mysteriously. 3. Someone left a letter saying he was taken. 4. Grandma moved to Maplewood and never told anyone. 5. The note in the box was written by Thomas himself. She looked at the list and frowned. "There's one more thing," she said aloud. "Who sent me that letter today?" The letter had arrived out of nowhere. No name, no address. Just a message that led her to the secret. Someone knew. Someone wanted her to find out, but who? The next morning, Emily decided to visit the town's public library. She remembered that her grandmother used to spend a lot of time there. Maybe there was something hidden in the archives. An old newspaper, a record, anything. As she drove, she practiced English sentences in her head, like she always told her students to do. "I'm looking for information about my grandmother." She repeated it softly. "I am searching for a man named Thomas Reed," she smiled. "Practice makes progress," she whispered, reminding herself that learning English, or solving a mystery, was all about patience and repetition. When she arrived, the librarian, Mrs. Benson, greeted her warmly. "Emily Carter. I haven't seen you in ages. How are your students?" "They're doing great," Emily said, smiling politely. "Actually, I'm here for something a little different today. I'm looking for old town records. From about 60 years ago." Mrs. Benson raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a while back. What are you researching?" Emily hesitated. "It's family history," she said softly. Mrs. Benson nodded and led her to the basement archives. The smell of old paper filled the air. Emily began looking through the yellowed newspapers, scanning headlines one by one. Car accident, town fair, missing dog, nothing. Then her eyes caught one small headline from June 1964. "Local man missing. Thomas Reed disappears mysteriously." Emily's heart stopped. She carefully lifted the paper. The article was short. It said that Thomas Reed, a factory worker, had gone missing one night while walking home. No one had seen or heard from him since. The police had searched the nearby woods but found nothing. The article ended with, "No leads have been discovered." She whispered, "So it was real." Then something strange caught her eye. A small handwritten note in the margin. It looked like someone had scribbled on the paper years ago. The handwriting was faint but still readable. "Don't believe what they said." He knew too much, Emily blinked. He knew too much? About what? Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. It was a message from her best friend, Daniel. "Hey Em, you okay? You disappeared after school yesterday. Want to grab coffee?" Emily smiled faintly. Daniel had always been her anchor, steady, logical, kind. She quickly typed back, "Can't today. I found something about Grandma. We'll explain later." She put the phone down and stared at the newspaper again. The phrase "he knew too much" echoed in her mind. Could it mean that Thomas had discovered something dangerous? Something someone didn't want him to share? She closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother's face. "Grandma, what were you mixed up in?" she whispered. Then another thought came to her. What if the truth wasn't just about love or loss? What if it involved something bigger? Something hidden deep in the town's past? Emily stood up, determined. She carefully folded the newspaper clipping and slipped it into her bag. Then she drove straight to the edge of town, to the old factory that had been closed for decades. She remembered hearing stories as a child that her grandmother's friend had worked there. The gate was rusty, the sign broken. Reed & Co. Textiles, it said faintly, almost erased by time. She parked and got out of the car. The place was silent except for the sound of the wind blowing through broken windows. She walked around, her footsteps echoing. "Hello?" she called softly, half expecting no answer. Then from behind the wall a voice said, "You shouldn't be here." Emily froze. She turned quickly. An old man was standing there leaning on a cane. His face was wrinkled, his eyes sharp. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'm looking for information about someone who worked here." "Thomas Reed." The old man's expression changed. "Thomas," he repeated. His eyes softened. "You're not from around here, are you?" "I'm his... I think I might be related to him," Emily said carefully. The man sighed. So it begins again, he muttered under his breath. Then louder he said, "My name's Walter. I worked here too. Thomas was my friend." Emily's heart leapt. "You knew him?" "Yes," Walter said slowly. "He was a good man, smart, brave, but he got involved in something he shouldn't have." Emily stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Walter looked around as if checking that no one was listening. Back in those days, the factory wasn't just making clothes. There were experiments, things the owners were hiding, chemicals testing accidents. Thomas found out. He said he was going to tell the police. The next day he disappeared. Emily's eyes widened. "So you think he was taken?" Walter nodded grimly. "That's what I believe. But no one dared to speak about it. People were scared. The company had power back then. They made the story go away." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Did my grandmother know?" Walter sighed deeply. "She came looking for him every day. I told her to stop asking questions, but she wouldn't. She loved him too much. One day she stopped coming. I figured she finally gave up, but now—" "You're here," Emily swallowed hard. "I found his letter," she said quietly. "He said he was taken against his will." Walter's eyes softened. "Then maybe there's still something out there, some proof." Emily took a deep breath. "Where can I find it?" Walter hesitated. "There's an old storage room in the basement. They locked it after Thomas disappeared. I don't know what's in there, but if you want answers, that's where you'll find them." Emily nodded, her heart racing. "Thank you, Mr. Walter." As she walked away, Walter called after her. "Be careful, girl. Some secrets don't want to be found." Emily didn't answer. She just looked back at the crumbling factory and whispered, "I have to know, Grandma. For both of you." The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of roses. Emily returned home with her mind spinning. She couldn't stop thinking about what Walter had said. Experiments, secrets, a hidden room. Everything sounded unbelievable. But the look in his eyes told her he was telling the truth. The question was how much of that truth was still buried, and who wanted it to stay that way. She sat at her kitchen table, the old photograph of her grandmother and Thomas spread out beside her notebook. "All right," she whispered to herself. "If the answers are in that basement, then that's where I have to go." But she couldn't just walk into an abandoned factory alone at night. She picked up her phone and called Daniel. He answered after 2 rings. "Hey, Em, finally. You vanished again. What's going on?" "I need your help," she said quietly. "Uh-oh. That sounds serious. What kind of help?" "The kind where we might be breaking into an old building," she said with a nervous laugh. There was silence for a moment. Then Daniel said, "You're joking." "I wish I were," she said. "It's about my grandmother. I think she was hiding something. Something huge," Daniel sighed. "Emily, I know you loved her, but maybe some things are better left in the past. Not this," Emily said firmly. "Please, Daniel. I can't do it alone." There was another pause. Then he said softly, "All right. Tell me where and when." Later that evening they met near the factory gates. The sky was dark, the air cold, and the sound of crickets filled the night. Daniel looked around nervously. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered. Emily smiled faintly. "Yeah, well, my grandmother's love story started here." He raised an eyebrow. "Some love story." They slipped inside through a broken side door. The air smelled of dust and rust. Emily turned on her flashlight. "Walter said there's a basement," she whispered. "He said it was locked after Thomas disappeared." "Walter?" Daniel asked, an old worker. "He was Thomas's friend." They walked carefully through the dark halls. Their footsteps echoed, and every sound made Daniel flinch. "You know," he whispered, "in movies this is the part where people regret everything." Emily smiled nervously. "Don't say that." Finally, they found a narrow staircase leading down. A rusty sign above it read storage. The door at the bottom was heavy and metal. Emily tried the handle. It was locked. Daniel sighed. Figures. Emily looked around and found a loose pipe on the floor. "Help me," she said. Together they pried the door open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Inside, it was dark and cold. Dust danced in the flashlight beam. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old boxes, tools, and papers. Emily's heart pounded. This must be it. They began looking around. Most of the papers were moldy and unreadable. But then Emily noticed a file with a tag that said, Confidential, Project R. She picked it up carefully. The papers inside were yellowed but still legible. Project R, she whispered. Do you think the R stands for read? Daniel shrugged. Could be, or something else, Emily began reading. The first page mentioned chemical trials, unauthorized testing, and health complications. She looked up, her face pale. They were experimenting on workers, she said quietly. Daniel frowned. You mean, without their permission? Emily nodded. That's why Thomas disappeared. He must have found out. Suddenly a noise came from the hallway above them. A faint creak like footsteps. Emily froze. Daniel whispered, Did you hear that? Yes, she said. Someone's here. They turned off the flashlight and crouched behind a shelf. The sound grew louder. A beam of light appeared through the crack in the door. Someone was walking around with a flashlight. Daniel mouthed, We need to go. Emily shook her head. Wait, look. Through the door they saw a man in a security uniform, but his movements were strange. Slow, careful, almost like he was searching for something, not patrolling. He stopped near the staircase, looked around, then left quietly. When the sound faded, Daniel let out a long breath. That was close. Emily nodded, her heart still racing. Let's take these papers and go. They stuffed the file into her bag and climbed back up the stairs. Outside, the night air felt like freedom. Daniel turned to her. You're lucky I like you, you know that. Otherwise, I'd never do something this crazy. Emily laughed shakily. Thank you, Daniel. Really. They got into the car, but before she started the engine, Emily looked at the factory one more time. Grandma, she whispered, I'm starting to see the truth. That night, at home, Emily spread the papers across her table. Some words were faded, but she could make out a few lines. Trial subjects, workers exposed to untested compounds. Fatal results, 2 confirmed. Cover operation initiated. Her hand trembled as she read. They caused deaths, she whispered. They killed people. Maybe even Thomas. But then she saw another line that made her stop. Subject TR, removed from site for further containment. Containment, she said aloud. Not death, not missing. Containment. Daniel, who was sitting beside her, frowned. The next morning, sunlight filled Emily's kitchen, but her mind was still heavy with questions. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the word containment. What did it mean? Was Thomas still alive back then? Where had they taken him? She couldn't rest until she knew. She made herself a cup of tea and opened her notebook again. Okay, she said out loud as if she were teaching one of her English classes. Let's review what we know. She smiled faintly at herself. Students, repeat after me. Review helps us remember. She started listing everything again. Thomas Reed worked at Reed & Co. He found out about illegal experiments. He disappeared. Grandma searched for him. Years later, I found letters and files. And now, she pointed to the last note. He was taken for containment. She looked up, thoughtful. If he was taken somewhere, someone must have kept records. Maybe the police, or a hospital. She grabbed her phone and called Daniel. "Morning, detective," he said sleepily. "Get up," she replied. "We have work to do." "Do we ever stop?" He groaned. "Not until we find Thomas Reed," she said firmly. An hour later they met outside the Maplewood Town Hall. The building was old, with tall white columns and heavy wooden doors. Inside, the smell of paper and polish filled the air. Emily walked straight to the records office. "Good morning," she said politely to the clerk behind the desk, a woman in her 50s with glasses and a friendly smile. "I'm looking for information about a man named Thomas Reed. He went missing in 1964. The woman looked surprised. "That's quite a long time ago." "Yes," Emily said, "it's for family history. I believe there might have been a police report or a hospital file." The clerk typed something on her computer and frowned. "Let's see. Reed Thomas. We don't have digital records that far back, but the old files are stored in the basement archives. You'll have to fill out a request form." Emily nodded. "Of course." As she filled in the form, Daniel whispered, "You really think they'll let us look through that stuff?" "Maybe not everything," she said, "but we'll find something." They waited while the clerk disappeared into the basement. 10 minutes later, she returned holding a thin file. "Here you go. There's not much in it, though. Says the case was closed." Emily thanked her and took the file. She and Daniel sat on a bench outside and opened it carefully. Inside were only a few pages. A missing person report, a witness statement, and a short note that made Emily's stomach twist. "Case closed. Subject transferred to medical facility by order of town council." Daniel frowned. "Transferred? That doesn't sound like a police decision." Emily nodded slowly. "No, it sounds like they moved him to a hospital. Or maybe somewhere else." She scanned the paper for details. At the bottom in faded ink was a single line. "Facility, Meadowbrook Institute." Daniel leaned closer. "Never heard of it." Emily looked up. "I have. Grandma mentioned it once. She said it was a hospital outside town, shut down years ago." Daniel sighed. "Of course it's shut down. Everything connected to this story is old and creepy." Emily stood up. "Then that's where we go next." They drove out of town, the road winding through the countryside. After half an hour, they saw the sign, Meadowbrook Institute, ESTers 1950. The letters were faded, the gate chained, and vines covered most of the building. Daniel looked uneasy. "You're not serious about going inside, are you?" Emily smiled faintly. "You're the one who always says adventure makes life interesting," he groaned. "I meant vacations, not ghost hospitals." They climbed over the gate and made their way to the entrance. The air smelled damp and old. Inside, the floors were cracked and the walls were peeling. Emily turned on her flashlight again. "This place is huge," Daniel whispered. They passed through long hallways filled with broken furniture and papers scattered on the floor. On one of the doors, faded letters read "Patient Records, Restricted Access." Emily's pulse quickened. "This is it." She pushed open the door. Inside were shelves of dusty files. Some were unreadable, but others still had labels. She began searching for Reed Thomas. Minutes passed. Then Daniel called, "Em, over here." She ran to him. He held up a folder labeled Reed Thomas, 1964. Emily took it carefully, her hands shaking. She opened the file. The first page was a medical report. Subject admitted without consent. Condition healthy. Purpose, observation, and study. Her eyes widened. They didn't just take him, they imprisoned him. She flipped through more pages. The next report read, Subject shows resistance to chemical exposure. Anomalous results recorded. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Emily shook her head. I don't know. But they were experimenting on him. Maybe he found out too much. and they decided to use him for their research. Then she turned to the last page. It said, "Subject relocated, 1965, status unknown." "Relocated?" Daniel repeated. "To where?" Emily looked at the bottom of the page. There was a faded stamp. "Property of Project Rose." Her breath caught. "Project Rose," she whispered. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Like the rose in your grandmother's garden?" "Yes," Emily said softly. "It can't be a coincidence." They stood in silence for a moment, both realizing that the story was far from over. Daniel said quietly, If this Project Rose still exists, it's not just a love story anymore. It's something much bigger." Emily nodded. "I know, but I need to finish what Grandma started." They took photos of the files and carefully put everything back. As they turned to leave, Emily noticed something carved into the wall near the doorway. It was faint but still clear enough to read, "Truth blooms under the rose." She reached out and touched the words. "Grandma's message was the same," she whispered. "The rose is the key." Daniel looked at her. "Do you think she knew about all this?" "I think she knew more than she ever told anyone," Emily said softly. "And she left clues for me to find." As they stepped outside into the sunlight, Emily felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. The truth was no longer just about Thomas. It was about her family, her town, and something much deeper. She turned to Daniel and smiled faintly. "You know," she said, "in my classes I always tell my students that every story has 3 parts, a beginning, a middle, and an ending. I think we're in the middle now." Daniel laughed softly. "Let's just hope the ending's a happy one." Emily looked back at the abandoned building, her heart filled with determination. "It will be," she said, "because I'm not giving up." They drove away as the wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint scent of roses once again. The drive back from Meadowbrook Institute was quiet. The car moved steadily along the empty country road, but Emily's thoughts raced faster than the wheels. Every clue seemed to pull her deeper into a web of secrets. Project Rose. The phrase repeated in her mind like a whisper that refused to fade. Beside her, Daniel finally broke the silence. "So," he said slowly, "let me get this straight. Your grandmother loved Thomas Reed. He discovered illegal experiments at the factory. He got taken away to some creepy hospital. And then Project Rose happened?" Emily nodded. "That's what it looks like," he sighed. "This is starting to sound like a movie." "Dark one." Emily smiled faintly. "Except it's my family's story." She looked out the window at the passing trees. "You know, when I teach my students English, I tell them that every word has power. Every word carries meaning. Truth, love, loss, they're not just vocabulary. They're real." Daniel looked at her. "So what does rose mean here?" Emily hesitated. In Grandma's letters, the rose always symbolized love and memory. But in the files, it's something else, a project name. Maybe both meanings are connected. When they reached Maplewood, Emily didn't drive home. Instead, she turned down a narrow street that led to the town's oldest area, the Archives building. Daniel groaned. "You're unbelievable. We've been breaking into factories and hospitals, and now you want to go digging through town records?" Emily grinned. "You said it yourself, it's like a movie. Every good mystery needs research." Inside, the air was cool and smelled of dust and paper. Rows of wooden drawers filled the archive room. Emily went straight to the section labeled Government Projects, 1950-1970. She pulled open drawer after drawer, scanning each label. Finally, she found it. Project Rose, 1965. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out the folder. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. "Moment of truth," he whispered. Inside were only a few pages stamped classified in bold red letters. The first page read, Project Rose, cooperative effort between Reed and Combe and Meadowbrook Institute to study potential effects of chemical compounds on human biology. Objective to enhance resistance and longevity. Emily frowned. Enhance resistance. Longevity. She looked at Daniel. They were trying to create something. Some kind of formula to make people stronger. Daniel shook his head. Sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. But the next page made Emily go still. It said, Primary test subject, Thomas Reed. Unexpected response to compound, abnormal cellular adaptation. Subject survives exposure beyond predicted limits. She whispered. He survived. Daniel leaned closer. You mean he didn't die? Emily nodded. He didn't just survive, he changed. They read the next few lines together. Due to unforeseen results, subject transferred to secondary facility for containment and observation. Project terminated. Record sealed. Daniel exhaled. So that's it? They locked him away because he was too strong? Emily's hands trembled. They took everything from him. His freedom, his life, his love. And Grandma never knew. She turned to the last page. There was a small note handwritten in blue ink. For Margaret. If you find this, I'm still here. Under the rose, the truth lives, Emily gasped softly. It's him. It's Thomas, Daniel stared at her. You think he wrote that? Yes, she said firmly. It's his handwriting. I saw it on the letter I found in Grandma's box. Daniel rubbed his forehead. So what does it mean? Under the rose, again? Emily closed her eyes for a moment. Maybe it's not a metaphor this time. Maybe it's a place. They sat there in silence, surrounded by the quiet hum of old secrets. Then suddenly something clicked in Emily's mind. She opened her eyes wide. The garden. Daniel blinked. What? My grandmother's garden, Emily said excitedly. When she passed away, I only kept the front part alive. But behind the house, there's an old shed, and a rose pattern carved on the floor tiles. I never understood why. What if that's where it is? Daniel nodded slowly. If I've learned anything from you, it's that you're probably right. That evening, the two of them drove to her grandmother's house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. The old house looked peaceful, unaware of the storm of truth it was hiding. Emily led Daniel to the back garden. The grass was tall, the flowers wild, but the single rose bush still stood tall near the fence. Behind it, half hidden by ivy, was the old wooden shed. Emily pushed open the door. Inside, it smelled of dust and memories. There were gardening tools, flower pots, and an old bench. On the floor, under the dirt, she could see faint tiles arranged in a circular pattern. There, she said, pointing. That's the rose design. They knelt and began brushing away the dirt. As the pattern cleared, they saw something strange. A small metal ring in the center of the tiles. Daniel raised his eyebrows. Please tell me that's not a trapdoor. Emily smiled nervously. Only one way to find out. Together they pulled on the ring. It lifted easily, revealing a narrow wooden hatch. A rush of cool air came up from below. Okay, Daniel said. This just went from mystery to horror movie. Emily grabbed a flashlight. Come on, she said softly. We've come this far. They climbed down carefully into a small underground space. The walls were made of stone, and the air smelled faintly of earth and old paper. In the center of the room was a table covered in dust. On it sat a small chest. Emily approached slowly. This must be it, she whispered. She opened the chest, and inside were old letters, photographs, and one single envelope addressed to Emily Carter. Her heart skipped a beat. He knew my name, she whispered. Daniel frowned. That's impossible. He disappeared decades before you were born. Emily opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter written in neat, elegant handwriting. To my granddaughter, Emily. If you are reading this, it means the truth has finally reached you. My name is Thomas Reed. I was taken because I learned what others wanted to hide. They changed me, but I survived. I never stopped loving your grandmother. She was the light that kept me alive. I left this letter because I knew one day someone from our family would find the courage to seek the truth. I am proud of you. The rose is not just a flower, it is a promise that love endures no matter how much time passes. Emily's hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. He knew about me, she whispered. Daniel put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emily, this is incredible. She nodded, her voice breaking. He was alive. He knew I'd come. At the bottom of the letter there was one last line. If you wish to see the final truth, go to the place where roses grow wild. Emily looked up at Daniel. That's the meadow outside town. Grandma used to take me there when I was little. Daniel smiled faintly. Then I guess we know where we're going next. Emily folded the letter carefully, holding it close to her chest. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered. And thank you, Thomas. For the first time, she felt peace but also determination. The story wasn't over yet. The last piece of truth was waiting for her, blooming somewhere among the wild roses. The next morning, the sky was pale blue, and a soft wind moved through the trees. Emily stood at the edge of the meadow, the same one her grandmother used to visit with her. She remembered running through the tall grass as a little girl, laughing as her grandmother called after her. Back then, she thought it was just a place for flowers and butterflies. Now she knew it held the final piece of her family's story. Daniel walked beside her, carrying a small backpack with flashlights, a notebook, and a bottle of water. So this is it, he said, looking around. The place where roses grow wild, Emily nodded. Grandma used to say this meadow was full of secrets. I thought she just meant childhood imagination. They began walking through the tall grass. The ground was uneven, and every step made the wildflowers sway gently. The air smelled of earth and sunlight. In the distance, Emily spotted something. An old, broken fence and what looked like a small stone marker. Over there, she said. When they reached it, they saw that the marker was covered with moss. Its writing nearly faded. Emily knelt and brushed away the dirt carefully. The words slowly appeared. Thomas Reed, 1940, unknown. Daniel frowned. Wait, unknown? Emily touched the cold stone. It's not a grave. It's a memorial. They never found his body. She stood there quietly for a moment. The wind moved softly through her hair. Then she noticed something else. Just behind the stone, hidden under the roses, there was a small metal plaque with strange initials. RCI. What's that? Daniel asked. Emily tilted her head. It could mean Reed & Coers Industries or something else entirely. She knelt again and pulled away the vines. Beneath the plaque was a small indentation in the ground, like a square outline. Daniel crouched beside her. Emily, that looks like a hatch. Emily looked up at him and smiled weakly. Here we go again. They cleared the dirt and pulled. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow set of stairs descending into darkness. The air that came up was cool and still, untouched for years. Daniel took a deep breath. Every time we do this, I feel like I should have stayed in the car. Emily smiled. But you never do. They climbed down slowly. The stairs led to a long tunnel made of concrete. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing pipes, old signs, and cobwebs. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly forward. As they walked, they saw faded writing on the wall. Property of RCI. Project Rose Storage Facility. Daniel whistled softly. So it was real. They built an entire underground lab out here. Emily's heart pounded. If we find what Thomas left behind, it could change everything. They walked for several minutes until they reached a heavy metal door. On it was a red symbol, a rose drawn in a circle. Emily pressed her hand against it. This is it. Daniel shone his light on a small keypad beside the door. It's locked. Emily stared at it, thinking hard. Then she remembered the letter, under the rose. The truth lives. She looked closer at the keypad and noticed faint numbers scratched next to. To 1965, she entered the numbers. Slowly. Beep. Click. The door unlocked. They stepped inside. The room beyond was filled with old machines. Shelves of notebooks and dusty glass containers. It looked abandoned for decades, but everything was still in place. On one table, under a cracked light, lay a sealed envelope and a small glass vial filled with a faintly glowing liquid. Emily approached it carefully. The envelope had her grandmother's name written on it, Margaret. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter written in the same careful handwriting as before. My dearest Margaret, they said I would die. They said no one could survive what they did to me. But love is stronger than fear. The formula they created didn't destroy me, it changed me. I can heal faster, live longer, but I am not the same. I escaped, but I couldn't return. They would have come for you. So I built this place to keep the truth safe. If Emily has found this, it means she has your courage. Tell her to remember what makes us human is not perfection, but love. Emily's breath caught. He was alive. He escaped. He left this for us. Daniel looked at the vial. So that's the formula? The thing that changed him? Emily nodded slowly. Probably. But I'm not touching it. Whatever it is, it's dangerous. And sacred. She looked around the room again. There were photographs pinned to the wall. Her grandmother, young and smiling. Thomas standing beside her with gentle eyes. And a third photo of the two of them holding hands in front of the factory. The rose symbol painted behind them. Emily whispered. They were going to share their discovery. But someone stopped them. Daniel sighed. Maybe that's what Project Rose was really about. Not power, but love. Emily smiled softly. You're learning, he laughed. You're a good teacher. She turned back to the table. He said love is stronger than fear. That's a lesson for all of us. She picked up the photo and smiled through tears. My grandmother used to tell me that language is more than words. It's connection. It's how we understand each other. And now I understand her story. Daniel looked around the room one last time. What will you do with all this? Daniel smiled. That's beautiful. She looked at him. It's true. My grandmother taught me English when I was little. And now, through her story, she's teaching me again, to listen, to understand, to love. They began walking back toward the car. The world around them felt lighter, more open. Emily could almost hear her grandmother's voice in the breeze, gentle and proud. When they reached the road, Daniel turned to her. So is this the end? Emily smiled. No, it's the beginning. New chapter. They stood there quietly for a while, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Then Emily said softly, Do you know what rose really means? Daniel shrugged. A flower? She shook her head. In Latin, rosa also means secret. That's why people used to say sub rosa, under the rose, when they spoke in confidence. It meant something private, something sacred. Grandma knew that. So did Thomas. Daniel smiled. Then I guess their love really was under the rose. Emily nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Yes, and now it's no longer a secret. They got into the car and started the engine. As they drove away, the meadow shimmered in the distance, filled with wild roses and sunlight, a living memory of love. Courage and truth, Emily whispered softly to herself. Under the rose, the truth lives. And for the first time, she understood every word. Days passed, but Emily couldn't stop thinking about everything she had discovered. Her mind was full of questions, yet also filled with peace. She had learned the truth about her grandmother's past, about Thomas Reed, and about the mystery that had shaped her family's life. Still, something inside her whispered that the story wasn't complete until she shared it. On a bright Monday morning, Emily stood in front of her class. Her students, teenagers from all over the world, sat waiting, their notebooks open, pens ready. They didn't know about the secret tunnels or the letters or the hidden lab, but Emily was about to tell them something even more important. Today, she began softly, we're not just learning English. We're learning about courage. A few students looked up curiously. She smiled. I want to tell you a story. It's about my grandmother, a woman who loved deeply and a man who never gave up. As she spoke, she watched their faces, every emotion reflecting in their eyes. She told them about Margaret and Thomas, about the factory, the letters, the rose, and the secret that lived beneath it. She didn't mention every detail, but she shared the heart of it, the hope, the love, and the courage to search for truth. When she finished, the classroom was silent. Then one student raised her hand. Miss Carter, she asked, why are you telling us this story? Emily smiled gently. Because stories teach us more than grammar ever could. They teach us about life, and every time you learn a new word, you open a new door. Just like I did when I followed my grandmother's words. She picked up a piece of chalk and wrote on the board. Truth, love, courage. Repeat after me, she said. Her students echoed. Truth, love, courage. Good, she said warmly. Now what do these words mean to you? One boy raised his hand. Truth means being honest even when it's hard. Excellent, Emily said. And love? Another student smiled. Love means never forgetting the people who matter. Emily nodded. And courage? A quiet girl near the back whispered, It means doing something scary. Because it's right. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Beautiful. All of you are right. She looked at the words on the board again. My grandmother taught me that the meaning of a word changes when you live it. When you feel truth, when you act with courage, when you love deeply, that's when language becomes alive. She walked slowly around the classroom. Do you know what's special about English? She asked. It's not just a language. It's a bridge. It connects you to the world. It helps you share your story. And every one of you has a story worth telling. The students smiled, inspired. Let me ask you something, she continued. Have you ever been afraid to speak in English? A few students nodded shyly. Emily smiled gently. That's okay. I've been afraid too. But learning a language is just like learning the truth. It's scary at first. You make mistakes. You feel lost. But if you keep going, one day everything starts to make sense. She paused, letting the word sink in. And when it does, you'll realize something powerful. Every mistake you made helped you grow. The students were quiet, thoughtful. Repeat after me, Emily said softly. Mistakes help me grow. Mistakes help me grow, they repeated. Good. Again, say it like you believe it. Mistakes help me grow. They said louder this time, smiling. Emily laughed. Perfect. That's the spirit. She looked around the room, feeling her heart fill with warmth. My grandmother used to say that every rose has thorns, but it's still beautiful. The same goes for learning. You'll face challenges, but if you keep going, you'll bloom. She turned to the board and drew a simple rose next to the 3 words. This rose, she said, is a symbol. It means love, memory, and truth. It's a reminder that everything we learn, Every person we love becomes a part of who we are. A student raised his hand. Miss Carter, do you think your grandmother knew we'd learn from her story too? Emily smiled softly. I think she hoped we would. After class, when the students left, Emily stayed behind, standing in front of the chalkboard. She ran her fingers over the words she'd written: truth, love, courage, and whispered to herself, "You did it, Grandma." That evening, Emily went home and sat in her grandmother's garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink, the same colors as the day she found the letter. She sat near the rose bush that had always stood proudly in the corner. She took out a notebook and began to write. My grandmother's story taught me that truth has a way of blooming, even in silence. It may sleep beneath the earth for years, but it never dies. And when it finally rises, it changes everything. She wrote for hours, pouring her heart into every word. Her story wasn't just about her family. It was about love that survived, truth that endured, and courage that kept growing. When she finished, she closed her notebook and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." "And thank you, Thomas. You gave me more than a mystery. You gave me meaning." The night air was gentle and warm. Fireflies flickered between the flowers like tiny lights guiding the path toward peace. Suddenly, Emily heard something, a faint sound of footsteps. She turned and saw an elderly man standing by the fence. His face was weathered, his eyes kind. He wore a hat, and in his hand was a single rose. "Beautiful evening," he said softly. Emily nodded. "It is," he smiled faintly. "You look like your grandmother." Her heart stopped. "I'm sorry," she whispered, standing up. "Do I know you?" The man smiled. "Not yet." He placed the rose gently on the bench and turned to leave. Emily called out, "Wait, who are you?" He paused, looked back, and said only, "Someone who once promised to keep the truth alive." Then he walked away, his silhouette fading into the twilight. Emily stood there, breathless. She picked up the rose. It was fresh, its petals soft and fragrant. She looked around, but the man was gone. A gentle breeze passed through the garden, carrying the faint scent of roses. She smiled, her heart full. "Good night, Thomas," she whispered. At that moment she knew some promises last forever. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Emily looked up and whispered one last sentence. "Under the rose, love lives on." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, waking Emily gently. For a moment she didn't move. She just lay there, listening to the sound of birds outside and feeling the quiet peace that filled her heart. Everything felt different now, lighter, brighter. It was as if the truth she had uncovered had finally set something free, not only in her family's story, but inside her own soul. She made a cup of tea and sat by the window, her notebook open in front of her. On the first page she wrote in neat letters, "A Family Secret, the Story Under the Rose." Beneath the title, she wrote a dedication, "For Margaret and Thomas, whose love taught me what courage really means." As she began to write, she realized she wasn't just telling a story. She was giving her students and maybe even the world a gift. The gift of understanding that language isn't just about words. It's about feelings, memories, and the power to connect hearts across time. Later that week, Emily's video titled "Learn English Through Stories, A Family Secret" went live on her teaching channel. She didn't expect much. It was just her way of blending her grandmother's story with her passion for teaching. But within days, thousands of people began watching. Comments poured in from learners all over the world. "This story made me cry. I learned so much new vocabulary, and about love and truth. I didn't just understand English better. I understood life better. Emily read every comment, smiling through her tears. She had found her purpose. The story that once felt hidden and painful had become a light that helped others learn, grow, and believe. One evening, she recorded a short message for her viewers. Her voice was calm, her smile warm. "Hi everyone," she said softly. "Thank you for joining me for this story. It means so much to know that it touched your hearts. My grandmother used to tell me that stories are like gardens. When we share them, they grow, and they bloom inside others. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep believing that your story matters too. Because it does." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "If you ever feel afraid to speak English, remember this. Every word you say is a seed. With time, with patience, and with courage, it will bloom. Just like the roses in our story."